Good morning.
Good morning. Yes. So uh, it's 5 minutes still till the beginning of the lecture, so you can ask me questions. Um, uh, Better use uh, chat. Uh, Here's chat. I will write good morning to, and you can also put me questions. Uh, and now we'll start with, I will just explain you the idea of the course. This is a history and philosophy of science, and as it is written in syllabus, uh, there will be lectures devoted to ancient science, medieval science, Renaissance science, science of the 17th century, of the 18th, 19th, 20th century, and at last there will be a special lecture devoted to philosophy of science. Well, this is my way of doing this course, and I'm just a little bit, I think I'm accustomed to this way, and the students, say it's okay with them. So maybe some of you don't like history, and that's why maybe it will create problems for you to the dates, the names, especially the names of ancient philosophers, of medieval philosophers, of Renaissance philosophers, or Renaissance scientists. I will try to use minimum of names and minimum of unnecessary information, but and every time I will introduce a new name, I will explain who he is and why he is important. Well, I have now the difficulty here when I'm doing this course in the 21st century, because previously during the Marxist period, it was easier for people to listen to the history of ancient philosophy, because it was something sacred in this course, because Lenin himself read attentively the history of philosophy of Hegel, and made many comments on the margins of this book, Hegel's History of Philosophy. And because Lenin was something sacred, Lenin is not to be introduced, yes, I hope. Lenin, Vladimir Lenin is not to be introduced specially. It's just name that you are familiar with somehow, especially if you know the geography of Moscow. We have Leninsky Prospect, we have mausoleum of Lenin on the Red Square. So Lenin is, I think, is worldwide. So, in the time of the Soviet Union, because Lenin put great attention to the history of ancient philosophy, to such names as Democritus or Plato. So we were obliged to be very serious about that, because Lenin himself appreciated ancient philosophy. So you understand. So the authority of Lenin helped the teachers to make this course, because if the students were lazy, he could say, well, you are so lazy, and see how Lenin appreciated ancient philosophers, how he attentively read first of all, the book of Hegel. I think Hegel doesn't need to be introduced, but I will write in chat Hegel. It's a German philosopher, and who influenced Karl Marx and influenced Lenin. And also Hegel is famous for his course, History of Philosophy, not only ancient philosophy, but philosophy in general. So, to some extent, I think, just this is enough for you to understand my sort of joke that Hegel influenced Lenin. Lenin sort of sanctified Hegel and all that is connected with Hegel. So, one step further, and ancient philosophy was also something sacred, you understand, something necessary, well, important, because Lenin put attention to it. Lenin used such names as Thales, Heraclitus, these are ancient philosophers, Thales, um, Heraclitus. Well, I will explain who are they. Just um, if you have problems, you can Google them. Heraclitus or Democritus, for example. These are most important figures. Well, we can add Pythagoras, who is also very known. Democritus. So all these names, difficult as they are to be remembered, were sort of sanctified by the fact that Lenin used them. Lenin commented on their opinions. Lenin reacted. So this was very important in the Soviet period. Now the Soviet period has ended. Lenin is like everybody else. So I cannot just argue from the point of view of Lenin's authority to you. So, but there were other periods of history of European civilization. For example, there was a period when Christianity was paramount. And at that time, also Christians wanted to find in this ancient philosophy their sort of predecessors, you understand? So that's why we can see on Mount Athos in the monastery the frescoes depicting Plato and Aristotle, for example. So these figures were also something sacred. They were even compared with Jewish prophets. So as the Jewish prophets prepared their coming of Christ, so in the same way it was said that ancient Greek philosophers also also prepared the coming of Christ. And also because Greek language was the language of the New Testament, so also in Greek language and in Greek culture, there was something very important for Christians. So Christianity also, if I had a Christian auditory, it would be easier for me to do this course, because I could appeal to the authority of Christianity. But here also the situation is nude public square, no preferred religions. So we can't also appeal to the authority of Christianity because it is not accepted by everybody. So the third one is the authority of the Muslim thinkers. You know that since if there are some Muslims listening to me, so they can understand that Arabs yes, I will explain to you. It is not about Lenin. It's about the authority or the importance of ancient philosophy. Now I'm speaking about Muslims, and I know that. Well, you remember that from the start, Arabs who were the main carriers of the new religion, were very much interested in ancient philosophy and translated the works of Aristotle, Euclides, and Ptolemy into Arabic language. And through these translations, it is interesting and curious that through these Arab translations, they were first known in the Latin West. This can be seen from the name of the book of Ptolemy, the astronomer. The book is called Almagest, and it is still known by this Arabic name, although it was written in Greek. You see, Almagest. So this is the proof that Arab philosophers, Arab thinkers were appreciated very much this Greek heritage. So if you speak with a Muslim auditory, you can appeal to such authorities as Ibn Sina, Ibn Rushd, Al-Ghazali, and other very important Muslim thinkers. But of course, this is not valid for everybody, okay? This is valid for only a part of my audience or my auditory. Then the fourth way of just stressing the importance of ancient Greek philosophy is to appeal to the cultural inheritance of the Renaissance period, European Renaissance. If you take Petrarca or Dante or say Boccaccio or any other thinker of the Renaissance, for them the ancient Greek and Latin heritage was something very precious and even sacred, I would say. For example, it's such a figure of Renaissance as Niccolo Machiavelli. I think it is not to be introduced, but still I will Machiavelli, because I promised that I will introduce every important name. So maybe Machiavelli is even more known than Lenin. I'm not sure, but I think for most of you it is known. Machiavelli is a very important Italian Renaissance thinker. And when he went to his personal library, where he kept the manuscript and the incunabulas of the first of his books, he had a big library. He always dressed himself in some new clothes, and they said, well, you are going to your library, why should you be dressed in such a way? And he said, well, I'm going to my dearest friends, my dear friends that I sort of, it was his personal attitude to those ancient thinkers whom he considered so important that he dressed himself in some fashionable way just to read them. Okay, they were not present, of course, but just out of deep sort of veneration for them. He well, this is a very interesting story. So that shows you, this is an example how the Renaissance people, the Renaissance thinkers appreciated the ancient heritage. And the last is the United States of America, because we are somehow connected with Massachusetts. So Skoltech is a partner of some very important American institutions. So you can also see how Americans appreciate ancient Greek heritage, especially democracy. The idea of democracy, as is preserved in the speech of Heraclitus, I think the famous Greek leader of the 5th century. So there was the ancient Greek historian preserves the speech of Pericles about the importance of democracy. So here we have also some authority. So you can choose among 5, but you can also, but we shall go by other way. We shall look at the ancient philosophical heritage from the scientific point of view. And this will be, I think, most easy way, because all of you are scientists. So all of you use the word atom or know what it is. So this is, I think, the most easy way to ancient philosophy. So just see the words you are using. For example, atom. It comes from the Greek word atomos, and atomos. Unfortunately, I don't have Greek characters in chat, so I will write in Latin characters. Atomos, which means undivided, A being the negation, the particle that of the negation. So atomos is a, and tomos, you know, the tome, this is for a good word for synonym for volume. So when you have tomos, or for example, if you remember Lenin, once again, there was a complete edition of the works of Lenin in 50 5 volumes, or tomos. Tom is in Russian or in French the synonym for volume. So tom is so the whole work of Lenin, for example, is divided in 55 parts, which are called volumes or tom. Tom says divided. So atomos means indivisible. So, and this word was introduced by Democritus, whom I already mentioned, the ancient Greek philosopher. He invented this word, and he has the copyright for this word. So when you are using the word atomos, you should pay something to Democritus. You of course you cannot pay money because he has no credit card, I mean, or bank account, I mean, Democritus. You cannot send money to the netherworld or to the world of the dead, but you can pay tribute by your interest to the or your sort of appreciation of his work. So this will be also the way to get somehow well some, well, I will say veneration, but there's a just a common word in Russian, it's уважение. Well, maybe Marina will help me with уважение. Respect, I would say, yes. So we can also respect those ancient thinkers for their contribution to our modern scientific language, okay? So this, well, maybe this not much, but this is something, okay? Democritus, no, Democritus, it's no democracy, Democritus. Democritus is a ancient Greek philosopher, Democritus. You see, when we started during the Soviet period, there was such subject as dialectical materialism. So it was obligatory in every high school, in every university. I studied on physical department of Moscow University, not on philosophical department, but still even on physical department of the university, we had obligatory course of dialectical materialism. And we started this course with ancient Greek philosophers who were sort of precursors of predecessors of dialectical materialism. Democritus, who invented this concept of atoms and void, was considered to be the first materialist philosopher, okay? Democritus. He lived in the, well, of course, there's something there's something common with Democritus and democracy, because it comes all from the word demos, which in Greek means population, or just demos, it's like
the people.
People, yes. So, but it's only no other connection between Democritus and democracy. Okay, so Democritus, of course, had no bank account because at that time there were no banks. Well, maybe he was wealthy or not. This is another question, but I mean that we cannot send him money, okay? But we can send him some our respects, okay, for inventing the word which had so long history. Now, the second conception is the conception of Pythagoras. And with Pythagoras, it was the word cosmos, also very important for us. Pythagoras invented this word. And also Pythagoras is known for his dictum that the numbers rule the world. So in the beginning, there are numbers. And you can see that a certain reflection of these Pythagoras ideas can be found even in the 20th century. For example, Eugen Wigner, a Nobel laureate in physics, said that wrote an article about the unreasonable effectiveness of mathematics in natural sciences. Okay, so you can see that Pythagoras, who lived in the 6th century before Christian era, and Eugen Wigner, who lived in the 20th century, just share the same idea that somehow numbers are in the core of all our thinking about the world. And the same was, we can also remember the dictum of Galileo. I think this name also is not to be long introduced. Galileo, who wrote that, who said that the book of nature is written in the language of mathematics. Okay, so here we have a certain tradition, starting from Pythagoras through Galileo to Wigner and to mathematical physics, that mathematics is very much important for science. Okay, so of course mathematics is a new word. At the time of Pythagoras, he used the word arithmos, which means number in Greek, because mathematics or mathesis just meant knowledge in Greek or study. So mathetes, for example, was a pupil, just a disciple. If you read the New Testament in Greek, you will find instead, well, there in the original, where we find in English translation disciples of Jesus Christ, you will find mathetes. So the word which means just discipleship and not mathematics in our understanding of it. So Pythagoras used the word arithmos. Okay. Well, also we can give thanks for Aristotle for such words as syllogism and logic. Well, to be logical. So, well, I think, here is in chat, there was a note from Alexander Golitsina. Why have we started the discussion of history and philosophy of science from Lenin and his views? So, it is presumed that it is illogical to start this course from Lenin. So, there is some logic is lacking, okay? But logic is the concept which Aristotle introduced. So logical thinking is, we are logical, because logic and syllogism are both Greek words introduced by Aristotle. So you see, we have now another important reason for appreciating ancient Greek philosophy. So because it helped us with our main concepts. Well, now I will just speak a few words about so-called, just the periodization of ancient Greek philosophy. So now I think I have motivated you enough, and you can now maybe we have come to a certain agreement or consensus. Okay, we have now a certain consensus that Greek philosophy is somehow important. So now we can just take the subjects by the horns, okay? By the horns. You understand? By the horns, okay? I will write this expression. Okay, to take it by the horns. So just come to the core of the matter. So, and the first, we'll start from periodization. So, and for this periodization of Greek philosophy, the most important notion is so-called presocratic. Presocratic. This is a technical term. Maybe some of you haven't heard about that. What is presocratic? Well, presocratic means that if a philosopher lived before Socrates or before, say, the year 400 before Christian era, is the date of the death of Socrates. So we can say that these philosophers are presocratics. But also pre-Socratics are, have some common feature that they, well, they perhaps wrote some books about nature, about philosophy, but somehow these books are preserved only in fragments. So we have so-called fragments of pre-Socratics, fragments of pre-Socratics. This is a technical term, and this is also the name of the book, which was written by a famous German philologist of the 19th century, Hermann Diels. I will just write his name, pre-Socratics, okay? Well, of course, it makes sense only if you appreciate just the course. If you say that this is all just trifles and not to be remembered, then I cannot add anything more. I have added a lot of reasons, I think. So if they are not effective, I can just put my hands up, okay, and say, well, I cannot do anything else. So, but then Hermann Diels. Well, why this maybe this not important German is I'm writing his name. I will explain. Maybe Hermann with two N at the end, but this is not very so much important. So Hermann Diels is the author of a famous book, Fragments of Pre-Socratics. It was written in German, the commentaries, I mean, and the preface, but the most part of these books are fragments in Greek and in Latin, as they are collected from different Greek and Latin authors. So here we have this problem of fragments. We don't have the entire texts, for example, of Thales, of Democritus, of Pythagoras. We have only stories about them, how they behaved, how they answered difficult questions, what were their views on nature or on society or on celestial bodies. This is a certain difficulty how to collect the precise information from fragments. Well, you know, start from scratch. This is a English expression, so start from sort of nothing. But we have to start with not a scratch, but with fragments. Well, if you read the book of Jules Verne, the adventures of Captain Grant, the novel started with some letter in the bottle which was badly preserved, and there were only fragments of this letter, but it was written happily in German, in English, and in French. So some fragments remained from French version, some from English version, and some from German version. So the task of, the children of Captain Grant, I'm sorry, the children of Captain Grant. For those who know Russian, Дети капитана Гранта, a novel by Jules Verne, okay? So there were fragments of this letter badly damaged by water, but there were some fragments, readable fragments in French, in English, and in German. And when they were compared, so there was, well, more or less the entire picture, but still there were some mistakes. So the travel to find Captain Grant and his ship took a long time, okay? And there were many difficulties which were happily surpassed, so there was a happy end, but still this episode shows us the difficulty of collecting precise information from fragments, because fragments are something accidental, something, well, why should this fragment be preserved rather than that fragment, okay? So for example, we can speak about fragments of my lecture. For example, if it is not recorded, then it will remain only in your reminiscences. And you can say, well, Lopandian said this and that. And another student will say, no, he said, I think he meant quite another thing. So the same discussion arises about Pythagoras, Democritus. What were their views? So we have to come to a certain consensus. And here we just use the voting or democratical procedure. So if most of the fragments insist that Pythagoras said that in the beginning of the world there were numbers and harmony, and then we can believe that perhaps it was the thing that Pythagoras himself said or his disciples or pupils said. Okay, if the majority of the fragments insist that Democritus was the inventor of the concept of atom and that he declared that in the beginning there were atoms and void, then we can say, well, perhaps there's something there. If we are informed that Thales of Miletus, the first, I think the first philosopher, the founder of the Miletian school, if the most of the fragments insist that he considered water to be the main element, the primordial element of the universe, the cause of all things, the principle of all, then we can say, well, perhaps there's something there. Okay, so of course we cannot say this with 100% probability. Of course, this is here's some place for for guesses. Okay, we can guess something, or this is a place for our intuition or for our, for example, erudition. The more we read Greek philosophers, the more we sort of dive into Greek language, Greek concept, Greek way of thinking, the more we understand them, but the less we understand the present day people, for example. This is the problem of specialists in ancient philosophy, that he is sort of buried in antiquity and has difficulty in communicating with the contemporary world, especially with the world of physicists. This is the problem, you see. That makes my lecture well. Either I am a specialist in ancient philosophy, then I know nothing about physics, about Einstein, about Heisenberg, about quantum mechanics, and I know everything about, say, pre-Socratics and Stoics or Platonics, and I read Greek fluently, and I am a specialist here. But then how can I come to other parts of my course if I am so engrossed, you understand, engrossed in antiquity? So this makes it difficult. So, but if I'm not a specialist, or say don't have a PhD in ancient philosophy, then I'm a dilettante. Then I'm like a superficial sort of. There's something superficial in my knowledge of Greek philosophy, and then why should you listen to some trifles or some say well, superficial opinions about ancient philosophers? So here you see, here we'll find a certain optimum way, like you know, the in economics, the price is something optimal. If you if the price will be too high, nobody will buy your product. Yes, if the price will be too low, then you will not have enough money from your enterprise. Okay, so price is something optimal. The same way here, we should find optimal solution. Not be so much engrossed in ancient philosophy as to forget the common world, and but not to be too superficial just to make mistakes in printing or dialing the names of the Greek philosophers. You see, so well, of course, I will make mistakes. Errare humanum est is a Latin a Latin saying. Errare errare humanum est, or man errs as long as he strives. This is a citation from Goethe's tragedy Faust. Man errs as long as he strives. Okay, this is very important for me. That's why I'll die it in chat. As long as he strives. Okay, so well, this is a kind of an introduction. So we have these pre-Socratics. Also, now I will make some precisions. I use this before Christian era and Christian era. Maybe some will object that why should I prefer the chronology based on the birth of Jesus, okay? But well, I would say that here we have just a consensus, because we have the year 2020th, okay, so this, if we ask why it is 2020, then perhaps if a child asks this question from his father, the explanation is that Jesus Christ was born in the zero year, okay? But if there follows the question who is Jesus Christ and why his birth is so important, then well, the direction of our thought are sort of pointed in a certain way, but I just don't want to speak too much about the importance of Jesus Christ for our calendar, but just take it as it is. So before Christian era, BCE, and Christian era. So there are, or CE. I used also, before I used AD, which is Anno Domini abbreviation. AD is a Christian era, the same. And so there was so there will be before Christ also. So well, BC, they used it in English. There was an abbreviation BC, before Christ, BC. But now I think these abbreviations are not so widely used, so I will stick to before Christian era and Christian era. If you prefer AD and BC, it's well, I can change at any time, just we can vote for that. Well, but anyway, Christ is mentioned in both variants, because AD it's Anno Domini, and Dominus is in Latin the Lord, so the Lord being Jesus Christ. Okay, so somehow as when I will be using this chronology, so Christ will be tacitly or implicitly mentioned. Okay, so don't be scandalized on that. This is I cannot make I can't find other way to be understood when I'm dealing with dates, with periods. Okay, periodization. Now about pre-Socratics. So there were, of course, a lot of them, and if you open the book of Deals, if you have some essential knowledge of German or Greek or Latin, so you will see that the information is amazingly large. So you can spend your whole life studying Greek and Latin and reading and learning by heart these citations, these fragments, and analyzing them, comparing them, it can fill your whole life. And you will have no time for doing physics, chemistry, or biology, okay? So I'm not insisting that you just drop your professional studies and sort of dive into ancient Greek philosophy or ancient world. So, well, I think what I'm telling you is quite enough. Now, if you are tired, we can make a 5 minutes break. Yegor Burkov, how do you think about that idea? To make a 5 minute break?
By me?
By
No.
me, because you are on my screen somehow. I don't know why. Maybe it's just also a kind of an accident. Uh, well, it's always a mystery for me why a certain man suddenly appears on my screen and other people are sort of left in shadows. So can I see, for example, Ernesto Campion? Or it is not possible?
In the top right of your screen, there should be a small button saying view or something else.
Найти участник. Okay. Well, I will. Yes, but well, what can I do with that? Ayrat Kamaleddinov. How can I introduce him to be seen on my screen? Or пригласить, yeah, okay? No, I think...
There should be something like gallery view, and in that view you can just see everyone on your screen simultaneously.
I see. Gallery view.
And too many people here.
I see. Well, now I see Alexei Fedosеев, okay? You are in Skoltech, it seems to me that I see.
I mean, it is only virtual.
It is only a show, yes?
Yes, it's okay. Virtual Skoltech.
Okay. Now, I have a question, yes, because we are having sort of a break, so we can just leave ancient philosophy behind and speak about some more worldly topics, okay? Worldly, you understand? So the worldly topic is the topic of survival of the fittest. So the survival in Skoltech means passing the course, receiving grades, making one's exam. And I can say that this is the 5th time that I'm doing this course in Skoltech. So there were 4, I think, more or less successful attempts to do this course, to read this course, and there were also examinations, unfortunately not on Zoom. So this Zoom experience is new for me. But I've made examinations in Moscow Physico-Technical Institute where I teach. So I know how to exam people via Zoom, okay, through Zoom. So I hope that we will not have too much problems with that. Well, the problem of a teacher is to get acquainted with his student, because there are more than 100 of you. So my main problem is to understand you with all your peculiarities, whether you are real persons or just you know, this Turing test. Maybe I'm speaking with a computer called Alexei Fedosеев, for example, and all that I see is just some computer fake image, okay, as the Skoltech behind you, okay. So I can easily be. This we'll speak about when we'll speak about René Descartes and his theory of universal doubt. So there will be this notion of demon of Descartes, a certain imaginary being that gives you false information. And so you can easily get lost here in this world, especially when there are too many people. And well, of course, I will make mistakes here also, not only in spelling Greek names and pronouncing Greek names, but also in recognizing my students. Okay, so this is perhaps the most painful mistake that I will make, just to put you the wrong mark, not the mark that you deserve. Okay, and how can we say this student deserves certain mark? This is also a deep philosophical question. Okay, um, well, so but still we have to do something with that. So maybe I will put more attention, pay more attention to my students than to ancient Greek or Renaissance or medieval philosophers. Okay, so I will somehow distribute my attention between my students and my course, the contents of my course. Because if I will tell you everything about Pythagoras or Democritus and forget your name, for example, this is not very good. So well, of course, some people are more easygoing and it's maybe easier for me to speak with them. Some people are a little bit introvert and maybe have some difficulties of communication, and especially with physicists, because there is such a problem as genius and madness. Okay, you know this problem was put by Italian psychiatrist Cesare Lombroso. I will write him in chat. Just this is a break, so I'm speaking nonsense. So don't put much, don't give much attention. But still, Cesare Lombroso, the genius and madness. Lombroso. Okay. Okay, so he's a 19th century man, a Jew by origin, but lived all his life in Italy and practiced psychiatry in Turin University. Okay, so he insisted that the more talented the man is, the more risks he have to develop mental disease. Okay, so I understand because I'm teaching for a quarter of a century in Moscow Physical Technical Institute, so I know such examples of very talented students who somehow have difficulties either in getting married or in getting divorced or in having children or in educating their children or in having relations with their scientific advisor or something with his or her parents. And well, because I'm very communicative, so I know my students sometimes they finished long ago and will still are they are my friends on Facebook, for example, and I know the details of their life. Some of them emigrated from Russia and live now in Switzerland or Austria or the United States. And today I received an information from my former student that she's safe in Vienna, where there's a terrible terrorist attack today. So this how my day has started, from this piece of information that Daria Romanovskaya is feeling safe in Vienna. Okay, so this is life. Okay, c'est la vie, as the French say. Okay, well, this is enough. I think for 5 minutes have passed, and about the course, I can say that it will, the details are on syllabus, and especially about the candidate exam. Well, usually the candidate exam is that you speak about the topic, or you are free to speak about the topic of your work. This is the how the model on which this exam is built in Moscow Physical Technical Institute. So there people write essay of about 20 pages on their work. But here I don't ask 20 pages. I ask only a brief presentation of about 7 minutes on your work. And from this brief presentation, which will last 7 minutes in Zoom also, I can get a certain like intuition. You understand? It will not be precise evaluation. It will be a certain intuition of me. How are you doing? Of course, you can say, well, those intuitions are not scientific because they are built on some instinct, you see, or maybe experience. Well, and of course, I can err, I can be mistaken here. So we'll have an opportunity to ascertain your mark. And there were examples when people wrote me that you very poorly you gave me a very poor mark, and I spent so long time preparing my presentation. So what can be done in this matter? And of course, I will answer politely. I'm supposed to politely answer every letter and somehow find the compromise, okay? So I'm not insisting on, this, I'm not a fascist, you understand, mad for power, okay? So, well, you of course, I'm speaking about myself. You can say, well, I'm just making a presentation of myself, but you can ask other people because I'm a known figure. For example, Marina, my teaching assistant, had an experience of my course, I think 3 years ago. Yes, Marina?
Yes, and I gave a presentation on Karl Popper.
Oh, very good. Yes, I remember it. We spoke about also Sigmund Freud, whether psychoanalysis is scientific or not scientific according to Karl Popper. Yes?
Maybe.
Okay, so so there are real people in Skoltech also who know me, and they can tell you how to sort of accustom yourself or adapt yourself to my certain peculiarities. Okay, so if you want to adapt yourself, if you are easy to adapt yourself to a certain person or his way of teaching, of his way of thinking, then you are free to do that. If you are not easy to adapt yourself to your teacher, if you find him too crazy or too extraordinary and difficult to adapt with, you don't understand what he's hinting at, what he's aiming at while speaking about Lenin or while speaking about Jesus Christ. So, of course, I can create some tensions within your consciousness or even public tensions, but I will try to minimize those tensions, okay, by sense of humor. This is, I think I possess it because I was born in Odessa, Ukraine. This city is famous for people with great sense of humor and anecdotes, okay? So as much as is left of me, with me of an Odyssite native of Odessa, I will try to use this humor and make it easier for you to communicate with me. Alina Bajanova asked why religious people are so bloodthirsty. Have the Greek philosophy an answer? Well, yes, Greek philosophy, if we take Plutarch, well, I have to introduce another name, Plutarch. Plutarch. He lived in, I think, 2nd century Christian era. Plutarch wrote an essay, or I would say, yes, I think essay on superstition. So, and he mentioned bloodthirsty rites of Carthage or Phoenicians who made like victims out of men and women, or out of children. You see, they offered children in a sacrifice to their gods. Okay, well, So I mean, you mean modern situation. Well, this will lead us in quite a difficult and painful discussion. And I just suggest you to read Plutarch on superstition. Or if you want some newer authority, I can suggest to you to read Francis Bacon also on superstition, or you can read also Richard Dawkins' God's Delusion, the famous book where he critically analyzes religions, especially mainstream religions. So of course you can have a lot of answers here. The Greek philosophers were Greece was free of human sacrifices, yes? So they were not practiced in Greece or in the Roman Empire. So people were not sacrificed to demons. So perhaps this made psychological situation in Greece less bloodthirsty, okay? Because there were no human sacrifices, okay? So, well, I think it is important. I will analyze this list of attendance just to memorize your names, because otherwise I just will not know who is attending my lectures and who is not. And well, just for getting more acquainted with you see. So we'll now temporarily skip the question of religion. We'll return to it later, because when we'll have a lecture on medieval period, we'll speak about Islam and its influence, sometimes very beneficial on the progress of knowledge, and also Christianity, which was a mixed blessing for science. From one part, it created such notions as law of nature, and Newton spoke very highly on the God, the Pantocrator, or God the Almighty, in his famous book, Mathematical Principles of Natural Philosophy. But also there was a case of Galileo, which was which is an example of how relations between science and religions can be very terse. So we'll speak about that later. Here we have now more peaceful topics. And first of all, Bertrand Russell. Yes, Bertrand Russell. Yes, Bertrand Russell is also a great skeptic, and he can be helpful in this question of bloodthirstiness of religions. Well, I will now speak about these three ancient, I would say, scientific programs. First of all, I will start with atomistic program. Well, it is called program, of course, by us, not by the inventors. I think Democritus didn't use this word program. It doesn't exist in any of the fragments which remain from Democritus. But still, the philosophers of science and historians of science use this notion of scientific philosophical program of atomism. So atomism is not only a curious view on nature, but it is consistent, and I think it is somehow logical. Also, there are well, about the essays I will say later when we'll have the next break. So now I would like to speak a few words about the contents of the course, because atomism as a concept is very important throughout the history of science. even up to Dalton and Mendeleev in the 19th century, and even to the creation of to the model of Rutherford, a planetary model of atom, and postulates of Niels Bohr, and so on. So atom will be used, this concept will be used in any epoch, even in the Middle Ages. This was the topic of my thesis in philosophy, atomism and continualism in medieval philosophy. So how can we speak about atomism in the Middle Ages? Well, we can speak about that also because Aristotle was one of the main critics of atomistic concept. And because Aristotle was much known and commented upon during the Middle Ages, so his views on Democritus also were in the focus of medieval commentators, okay, like Thomas Aquinas or Averroes or Ibn Rushd or some others. So we can say that during the Middle Ages, people were also acquainted somehow with the views of ancient atomists. Also, of course, they rejected them. You cannot hold all the programs simultaneously. Either you are atomist, or you are continualist, or you are Pythagorean, or you are naturalist. Okay, so you cannot be all. You cannot just share all the scientific programs at the same time. Oh, well, and that's why if you are atomist, so it somehow excludes the continualistic approach of Aristotle. But now a few words about main, I would say, thesis of atomism. First of all that we see is an illusion. Tastes, smells, colors, noises, it's all illusion. All that exists really in reality are atoms and void. And these atoms, while interacting with our senses, they produce colors, tastes, noises, and so on. So in the principle, in the beginning, as we, if to use the phrase from the Bible, in the beginning there were atoms and void. Okay, you know, the Bible starts with the words, "In the beginning God created heaven and earth." I mean the Old Testament. So now we can say that if we read the Bible from Democritus, it will start with these words: "In the beginning there were atoms and void, nothing else." All that we see, including us humans, even including gods, all are created or are made out of, not created, better say, because there's no creator in atomism. The world exists and atoms themselves existed from all eternity. So they were not created. Things are not created. Things are sort of made out of atoms, or so when atoms collide or interact with each other somehow, they form the objects. The metaphor which Democritus himself used, well, we have to trust Aristotle for that, but I think it's a valid source. The metaphor is that as as words are built out of letters, in the same way objects are built out of atoms. So if you want to make a word, say atomos, it is built out of 6 letters, 6 Greek letters: alpha, tau, omicron, mu, omicron again, and s, sigma. So these 6 Greek letters built one word. Objects which we see are built out of atoms. So, and atoms differ only in their configurations, in their positions versus each other, and in their shapes. Okay, well, shapes and configurations are more or less the same. Well, This is more or less, and the void also. Void or vacuum or just free space, free of objects, is important for atoms to move, because if there were no void, there would be no possibility of motion. You cannot move if you are just jammed or sort of how to say in a, well, if you cannot move in a traffic jam. Well, let's put it this way. You cannot move your car if there's a traffic jam. So in order to move your car, you need free space before your car, okay? The freer the roads, the better is the motion. The better are the possibilities for your motion. So for atoms to move, void, you understand, void. Void is, I'm sorry, void. Void is vacuum in Russian, and vacuum in English, I think, like that. Void. So, yes, maybe in Buddhism there were also, and I know that in Hinduism there are concepts analogous to Greek teachings. So maybe we can find something like that in the Chinese philosophy. So there are, of course, volumes written about the history of atomistic concepts in different cultures. Well, but let us stick to the Greek variant, because the word atom comes from Greek language. So I think it's the most easy way to deal with this question. Otherwise, we'll get lost, okay? So I don't insist that Democritus was the first man on earth to invent this concept. Perhaps some sage in India did it before him, okay? I gladly sort of agree with that supposition. Now, atoms and void, and we have already introduced two more notions, infinity and eternity, because if void exists, nothing can sort of there can be no border to void, because void is infinite by its nature. You cannot sort of like put an end to a void, or just contain the void in some finite space, okay? So this idea that void is infinite. So atoms are moving in infinite void. We'll return to this concept when we'll speak about René Descartes and Isaac Newton, because they reintroduced this idea of infinity in physics, okay? Well, for Aristotle, the world was, of course, finite. And the border of the finite Aristotelian world was the sphere of fixed stars. So all the stars were thought to be on one sphere, be situated on one sphere, and they were equally distant from the center of the world, which was considered to be the center of the Earth, spherical Earth. This is Aristotelian concept. So, you know, in Greek, they used, of course, they used the Greek word. The Greek word is canon, which is the same as void or vacuum. In Latin translations of Aristotle, for example, I found the word vacuum. I'm sorry, vacuum. This is a technical word which was used by Thomas Aquinas and other Latin commentators on Aristotle. So this word vacuum comes from the Middle Ages, okay? Because I've seen it by my own eyes in the texts of Thomas Aquinas, for example, a famous medieval scholar commenting on Aristotle. This was the subject of my candidate dissertation, or PhD in philosophy. Well, PhD in philosophy is like a pleonasm. Well, just my dissertation in philosophy, which I defended in 1990. So I read Thomas Aquinas in original, in Latin, and I saw this word vacuum, okay? In Latin, it's pronounced vacuum, like in Russian. So, and this is a translation of the Greek word kenon, which is not so much known as the word atom. Okay, atomos. So I wrote it to Marina Teplякова, then I will write it to everybody, okay? Because kenon, non, and vacuum. Okay, so that's the answer for the question: is vacuum made out of atoms? Not so. Vacuum is another like principle. So there are two principles, two initial principles, different from each other. Atoms are full, and say void is sort of empty, okay? Full and empty. So like male or female, even, odd. So there were like, I would say, contradictory, how to say, the principles that contradict each other somehow. But out of this contradiction came some unity. And of course, this was a challenge for logic, because Democritus himself called atoms being and void non-being. But when you say that void exists, so you make somehow a logical mistake, that you say non-existent thing exists. Okay, so this is illogical. If void is non-existent or void is non-being, according to Democritus himself, or one of the fragments remaining from Democritus, so there's somehow a logical contradiction. So Aristotle made much of this illogical character of atomism. That's why he discarded atomistic concept, because of lack of inner logic there. But when we come to dialecticians like Hegel, whom we mentioned already, Hegel said, where in one of his theses, which he defended while a young professor, before becoming a professor, he had to defend his thesis on philosophy. And one of his theses was, where there is no contradiction, there is no truth. Okay? Where there is no contradiction, there is no truth. So truth is born out of contradictions. So what is a defect, according to Aristotle, becomes a strong point of atomism, that this contradiction that between existence and non-existence. So void somehow in one way exists, and in one way it doesn't exist. Okay, so here's a contradiction which is according to Hegel, it is gives life to everything. Okay, so this is a living concept because it has contradictions within it. Okay, for strict logicians, they say this is nonsense. If there's contradiction, we should discard it immediately. Okay, but you know, also somehow this idea of Hegel was very popular also among scholars of the 20th century. For example, Niels Bohr, also with his principle of complementarity, spoke much about these contradictions. Okay, and he said that contradictions can be very productive. Okay, we'll speak about that later. Without any theoretical basis, well, I think Democritus, it was a kind of an intuition. Well, of course, we can say about atomic theory, but well, with Democritus, it was not developed to, I would say, fully, because Democritus had no idea of force, which forces of attraction and repulsion. When these idea of forces appeared with first with Newton and then with a very important figure, unfortunately not now forgotten, Boscovich, who was a Croatian from the Croatian scientist of the 18th century, atomism of Boscovich was like modified it introduced the ideas of forces of attraction and repulsion between atoms. So this was the first concept where forces and atoms were introduced simultaneously, and that made atomism of Boscovich logically consistent, free of errors. Okay, you see. So also Boscovich insisted that atoms are points, they have no dimensions, and this of course somehow equaled atoms with void, because point is somehow nothing. Okay, you cannot measure it if it is point, because point has, according to Euclid, point has no parts. Okay, so point is something like immaterial. Okay, well, we'll come to that later. Now I would say that of course even Boscovich, although he how to say improved atomistic theory, he used the word atom. So the word atom was used by everybody, starting from Democritus and ending with say Niels Bohr. So also vacuum. We say vacuum physics, vacuum tubes, and so this word also had a great future. Oh, but it was not a Greek word, it was a Latin word. But as a Latin word, it was introduced while translating Aristotle from Greek into Latin, okay, or from Arabic into Latin. So when the first translations of Aristotle into Latin appeared the word vacuum in Latin, and it also had a long life due to Democritus himself, but only in Latin translation. Now, okay, why you ask Dmitry Krukov, why you ask Ekaterina? So the kind of an internal discussion here. Ekaterina Kuzmina. As far as I know, Greeks totally didn't like nothing. I'm sorry, I will read it. It's not so easy. Okay. As far as I know, it's Ekaterina Kuzmina writing. Greeks totally didn't like nothing concept. For example, they didn't have null in their math. Nevertheless, they knew that this concept exists from India. Why is so? Is it because of culture? Well, to some extent, of course, Democritus is Greek. Greek, 100% Greek. He wrote in Greek and he lived among the Greeks, and the Greeks knew him, and the Greeks answered. For example, Aristotle is a Greek by capital letter, and he devoted pages and pages to disproving Democritus. So if there existed no other fragments from Democritus than those which remained in Aristotle's works, and Aristotle, we have entire works of him, okay? Aristotle was very prolific, I would say. So if we analyze the text of Aristotle, we see that he, described Democritus' concept of atomistic concept in details and took great pains to disprove it, okay? So he tried to understand the inner logic of atomism and tried to disprove it sort of step by step, okay? So we cannot say that the idea of void was foreign to the Greeks, because Democritus was not foreign to his own people. Well, about the zero in mathematics, yes, this is a great problem, because Pythagoras started from 1. So his first number was 1. And also he divided all numbers in even and odd numbers. And he just thought very much about this distinction between even and odd numbers, and he even because numbers are in the principle of the world. Yes, yes. For Democritus, the Bible of Democritus starts with the words in the beginning there were atoms and void. So the Bible, according to Pythagoras, starts from the, well, imaginary Bible from Pythagoras will start with the words in the beginning there were numbers and harmony. Okay, musical harmony born out of numbers. Okay, well, so if numbers are in the beginning, then there will be, they are to explain everything. For example, gender differences. So even numbers are female numbers, and odd numbers are male numbers. Okay, so male and female also are introduced into numbers. Okay, it's very interesting. We can speak a lot about that, but maybe a little bit later. So I want to finish with Democritus. So we spoke about now 4 concepts: atoms, void, infinity, and eternity. Now we will speak about the most important point is that uh, the most the most important is this idea, how to say, or guess about the inertial motion, because the motion of Democritus atoms are sort of nothing. Well, they are moving unless something changes their route. So there was no idea of force, but there was an idea of interaction or collision. So atom is moving unless he collides with another atom. And out of these collisions are born objects. Well, take it as it is, okay? Don't be too hard on, don't press too much Democritus. Just pay attention that he is much older than you, okay? He lived before Jesus Christ, okay? So have pity with Democritus. Don't press him hard as Aristotle did. Of course, Aristotle pressed hard Democritus for that motion sort of in infinity, because for Aristotle, every motion had to have a goal or a purpose, aim, understand, purpose. All motions, according to Aristotle, are purposeful. They have, there's a so-called final cause of all motions. So every motion is from some point of starting point to end point, okay? Like in quantum mechanics, when you have a sort of one state and you pass to another state, okay? So maybe for those who study quantum mechanics, Aristotelian approach is more sort of recognizable, okay? But for, you see, but for, say, Galileo and Newton and Descartes, who introduced the principle of inertial movement, they are perhaps on the side of Democritus, that the motion can have no goal, that it just can continue without any aim, without any end. So according to Democritus, we can imagine the idea that atom tends in infinity. Well, of course, he collides sooner or later with other atom, but if nothing hinders him, he can go into eternity. And for Aristotle, it's unacceptable. He says, well, this is just nonsense, that a motion can be tended to infinity, okay? But for Descartes and for Newton, there's no nonsense. This is a principle of inertia. So there's we can say that the idea of motion with Democritus somehow contains this principle of inertia in its like seed. Okay, it's not expressed in full terms. It will be expressed later by Galileo, by Descartes, by Newton, but in its seed we can see this concept of inertial motion, the motion which has no end, which has no aim, which can be continued to infinity. Okay. Well, this is also important. Well, now we have more or less the whole picture, and what is left is to answer the objections which Aristotle gave to atomistic concept. The most important objection is what holds atoms together, why atoms sort of do not follow their ways. For example, if void is the principle of sort of lightness and atoms are principles of heaviness, then why, what holds atoms together? Why, if atoms are heavy, they should fall down? Okay, so why they remain somewhere in my chest, these atoms, if they are heavy? Because Aristotle said that heavy objects tend to fall, so something should preserve them from falling down. Okay, and what is that? And it could be only force of attraction between atoms. And this idea was not introduced by Democritus. Later, much later, in the 6th century Christian era, in one of the in the works of one of the late commentators who lived in Alexandria, I think Simplicius, there we find that for the first time the idea of anchors. This I'm sorry, I didn't write it. Anchor. Anchor. You know anchor. Ships have anchors, okay, by which they are preserved in the ports. Okay, anchor. Yes. No problem with this word. So according to Simplicius, Democritus imagined that there are certain anchors by which atoms can be held together. Okay, so anchors are like a substitute for the concept of force of attraction. Okay, so if anchors, so if these atoms have anchors, then it can explain why they are not sort of that they are stable in their configurations. So the bodies are stable, being built out of atoms, because atoms are using their anchors, and it makes the configuration stable. But this concept of anchor can be found only in the commentary of the 6th century Christian era. So it is more than 1,000 years after Democritus. So you see that this is not a reliable source, okay? Because Aristotle speaks nothing of anchors. He knew nothing about them. Otherwise, he would have explained his view on them. But so it seems that initially the main, I would say, the main weak point of atomism was this absence of the idea of force, of the idea of interaction, of the idea of two kinds of forces, of attraction and repulsion. And when they were introduced, I just am repeating myself, in the 18th century by Boscovich, then everything sort of stood in its place. Okay. Well, with that I will end the discussion on atomistic program. We have 2 programs more before we end with antiquity. And well, I mean with pre-Socratics, and start Plato and Aristotle, which are also very important. But maybe, I don't know whether we'll have time today, or maybe we'll have to do it on Thursday. Well, maybe you are overtired with the, I'm sorry, overladen with information, but there can be no other way. If we remember Hegel, for example, once a French philosopher, Auguste Comte, came, he was much younger than Hegel. He came to Hegel and said, whether your philosophy, Hegelian philosophy, can be explained briefly and in French. And Hegel said, well, it can neither be explained more briefly or more concise, nor in French. Okay, so because Hegelian philosophy can be explained only in German, it presumably. Okay, so we can say also that ancient philosophy cannot be explained more briefly than within 2 lectures. Okay, at least. And well, in French, I don't know. I'm not an expert in French. I cannot deliver lectures in French. So I think we can. There is a certain tradition to explain ancient philosophy in English. And you mentioned Bertrand Russell. He wrote also the book History of Western Philosophy, and in this book he devoted quite a lot of pages to ancient philosophy. If you open the book by Bertrand Russell, you will see that. Okay, now Pythagoreans. So the Bible of Pythagoras starts with the words in the beginning. There were harmony and numbers, or numbers and harmony. Well, what is numbers is more or less understood. The 0 was not among the numbers. The rise started with 1. Of course, there were integers, not irrational numbers, but the problem of irrationality appeared sooner or later, maybe with Pythagoreans themselves, or at least with Euclid in his principles. It means the incommensurability of the diagonal with the side in the square. If we take a square, there's an incommensurability of the side and the diagonal. And it was known to Euclides. It is part of his, it is one of the theorems of Euclides, where Euclides proves that this incommensurability exists really. Well, I will not just laden you with proofs. You can see it themselves. It's not so difficult, and maybe some of you already know how to prove it. But it, of course, puzzled Pythagoreans. That's why they kept this information secret. Maybe if they had an idea of 0 from India, they would also keep it secret, because 0 is neither male nor female. So it defies the whole concept of Pythagoreans, that numbers should be either male or female. So 0 is neuter. It's neither male nor female. So it didn't fit into a Pythagorean view. Now also there were 10 how to say counterparts, or 10 contradictories, I would say. First is odd and even, male and female, good and bad, right and curved, and so on. So there are 10 all in all. For women, especially for such feminist ideologists as Simone de Beauvoir, the consort of Jean-Paul Sartre, Simone de Beauvoir. Well, she wrote a book which is called The Second Sex, and in the introduction she mentions this Pythagorean view, and she calls it male view or male chauvinism, because according to Pythagoras, odd numbers are masculine numbers, even numbers are feminine numbers. And so even numbers, they correspond with curved, with the idea of curved, with the idea of evil, and with the ideal of darkness. Okay, so if light and darkness, you understand, there's oppositions, sort of 10 oppositions. So woman like finds company in very unwelcome. Oh, is woman appears in quite bad company, evil, curved, left-handed, and so on. So Simone de Beauvoir sees here some denigration of the concept of woman. Yes, perhaps it is so. Perhaps Pythagorean program was male-centered. But of course, you cannot do anything, you cannot do any arithmetic without even numbers. If you have only odd numbers, you cannot reach anything. So somehow these oppositions were there was a principle of certain complementarity, as of course between man and woman. You cannot, if there's only a male society, you cannot beget children, so you will be childless. So you need woman somehow. And according to Plutarch, I mentioned Plutarch already. So Plutarch have a certain essay on the number 5. So number 5 was considered quite a sacred number. Number 5. Why? What is special about 5? Because 5 symbolizes a family, because it consists of 3 and 2, and 2 being the first, according to Pythagoreans, 1 is exceptionate. So 3 is the first male number, is 3, and the first female number is 2. So 2 and 3 makes 5. So 5 is the symbol of unity of man and woman, and a symbol of a family. That makes 5 a sacred number. And that's why this inscription of 5, which is in Greek related as epsilon, because Greeks didn't have Arabic numbers, they had only numbers they expressed with letters. For example, letter number 1 is alpha, number 2 is beta, number 3 is gamma, number 4 is delta, and number 5 is epsilon. So epsilon appeared on in the sanctuary of Delphi, the sanctuary devoted to god Apollo. And so Plutarch was sort of just put a question: what makes this? Why this this number 5 is so special? And he just delivers us a story about Pythagoreans and their concept of male and female numbers and so on. So we get that from Plutarch, but I think it is a reliable source. Now, did Pythagoras consider prime numbers and the concept that any given number can be constructed out of them? Well, I'm not sure about prime numbers. I think, I'm not an expert here, so I have some limitations. So maybe I can give you my email, so you can write me, just put me this question in privately, and I will try to Google the right answer, okay? But I'm not sure that prime numbers were just the main point with Pythagoras. Pythagoras insisted, for example, on a perfect nature of number 10. You see, number 10 also, not only 5, but also 10. Why? Because I think because of this system just adapted with Greeks. So they, for example, I said to you already that alpha means 1, beta 2, epsilon 5, say, and then somehow when you reach the letter number 10, I think it is, I have to take a Greek book just to see and show you how it is. Well, here is the, I will find it, just not sure if this one. No, unfortunately, I cannot find this book immediately. Well, you just can find in Wikipedia Greek numbers. So starting from the 10th letter, there will be added again alpha, and that will mean 11. And then it will be added. So 11 it consists of two letters. The 10th letter of the Greek alphabet, well, I forgot what it is. I think it's iota, and the first and the letter alpha. So there will be two letters to express 11. So you understand. So there's a decimal system. Okay. Well, yes, also about planetary movement, I will speak about that. It is very important. Thank you for reminding me. I will not skip this question because it is very important. The Pythagorean system, how to say, have a system of the celestial bodies, how he, I told you already that Pythagoras invented the word cosmos. So what is this? Well, I will finish with numbers and then I will come to this question of Pythagorean astronomy. I will finish with number 10. So number 10 is sacred because of the decimal system accepted by Pythagoreans and Greeks throughout Greece. Well, because in Babylonia there was the system was founded on the number 60, okay? 60. So we have 60 degrees in, well, we have 60 seconds in a minute, and we have 60 minutes in an hour. These are all remnants of Babylonian system, system of calculation, okay? But Pythagorean used the decimal system, so that makes it that 10 is a special number. And now we just smoothly come to the problem of Pythagorean cosmos, because according to Pythagoras there were 10 heavenly bodies, but we can find only 9. I mean 5 planets, sun, moon, earth, and the sphere of stars. So all in all, there are 9. Sphere of stars was considered to be passed for one heavenly body, because all the stars were considered to be situated on one sphere. Okay, so this sphere of stars was one body. Okay, 5 planets adds to this sphere, so will be 6. The sun and the moon adds, there will be 8. The earth adds also, because earth was considered by Pythagorean to be a heavenly body, also like others. So they introduced first this idea of spherical shape of the earth, although it is not trivial, of course, non-trivial, but the 10th is lacking. So they invented, to complete their system, the so-called anti-earth, okay, which we can never see, like Bertrand Russell's cattle, you know, cattle of Russell. So there are some cattle existing in space which we can never see because it is too small for our telescopes, but still it's somewhere there. So for Russell, it was just an example of introducing non-necessary objects or non-necessary causes. But with a and perhaps he borrowed the notion of this cattle from Pythagorean idea of introducing invisible anti-earth, just to complete the numbers that it should be, there should be 10 heavenly bodies. Okay, so from this concept comes 2 important conclusions. First conclusion is that the shape of the earth is spherical, because earth is akin to sun, moon, which are spherical. So the well, sphericity of the Earth was not easy to prove at that time, and it was proved later by Aristotle by means of astronomical observations, because at that time, in the times of Aristotle, it was known that the some stars are seen in Egypt and none seen in Greece, and if the Earth was flat, this couldn't be explained why the and it is easy to explain if we presume the sphericity of the Earth. Well, it is just one example. Well, sphericity of the Earth started from Pythagoras, and I think it was one of the most important inventions of the Greek mind, because many civilizations still possessed, especially also Indian, I think, possessed this notion of the flat Earth. Well, because it seems more reasonable and more like fit for a human mind. Sphericity of the Earth. And the second one is that the Earth moves around a certain central fire, that the Earth is not motionless, that the Earth moves. When, for example, Galileo was accused of Copernican heresy, sometimes instead of Copernican heresy, there was added Pythagorean heresy or Pythagorean opinions. And also Copernicus himself, in the preface to his book on the rotations of the heavenly bodies, he himself reminds the reader that this concept of the moving Earth was not like foreign to ancient thinkers, especially to Pythagoreans. So two concepts are very important, and they outlived Pythagorean school. Yes, Russell's teapot. Yes, so Russell's teapot is an analog of this anti-Earth imaginary, which we cannot see because it is always in shadow, but it is very important for because we want this. We sort of postulate that the heavenly bodies should be 10 in numbers, because 10 is a special number. Okay, well. So much for, I think, for Pythagoreans. Now we have to pass to Aristotle and his, well, I called it in my dissertation, well, I'm not of course the inventor of this term, but it is not widely used, continualistic. Continuum. Well, continuum is, I think, more or less known. Continuum. Okay, but the adjective continualistic seems a little bit strange and artificial. Yes, continualistic. So, well, this is like we can say anti-atomistic. So with Aristotle we have the major opponent of atomism. So according to Aristotle, the world is built out of, well, of course, first of all, that the world is divided into two parts, the sublunar world and the heavenly world. Yes, I asked my friend from Sudan, who knows Arabic language very well, and he says that in Arabic language there is a word for sublunar. In Russian it is podlunny, okay? And there's a verse of Pushkin, and I will be glorious until in the sublunar world will live just a single poet. Okay, this is a verse from Pushkin which I translated myself. Okay, in Russian it sounds much better. But if there are people who are familiar with Arabic language, they can confirm even now in chat that there is a word in Arabic which just corresponds to sublunar. Okay, sublunar. Sublunar. Maybe Behnam can do it. You know Arabic. Who knows Arabic? Just please take the microphone, okay? People are not waiting. I hope this can be solved by Wikipedia. Just take in Iranian, in Parsi, there's a word for sublunar. Well, this is good because Behnam, thank you. So this is a problem. This is no problem because I can understand how this word crept into Arabic language, because Aristotle was translated from Greek into Arabic and commented upon by such important figures as Ibn Rushd, who was called in Latin West Averroes. He's known by his Latin name Averroes, but he was very much in how to say, in evaluation, very much esteemed by, for example, Thomas Aquinas, who called Averroes the commentator with capital letter, the commentator. And he called Aristotle the philosopher and Averroes the commentator. Okay, so this this division, which seems quite clear for us, this division into sublunar and heavenly world, the finiteness of cosmos, well, which is akin to Pythagorean idea. The Pythagoreans also insisted on the finiteness of cosmos. Дольний горный. Well, we can say so also. Maybe there's, but you see there's a little difference between дольний and горный. Well, дольний means being in the valley, and горний it means in the mountains. So they, I think this pair of opposites corresponds to angelic world and or spiritual world and material world. So this is leads us in a certain direction, which will, I think, in the wrong direction now. But we'll speak about this division of the world into angelical and or spiritual and material when we'll speak about the medieval concepts of the world. But now I think it is misleading a little bit, because nobody denies that the moon is a material body. It is not spiritual body. It is can be very easily seen and you understand. And so also all the planets, the stars are just, well, they can say they are sensual objects. They're the objects which we see by our senses. So they are not angelical. When we say about горний, in Russian it means spiritual, angelical, so not of this world. So it's like Russell's kettle. So we cannot see them. That's why Russell, well, denied or sort of put in question spiritual realities, because especially the reality of God, because he considered them to be too far from our senses and too far from strict proofs. So this is a, well, this is a part of a philosophy of science. I mean, materialistic philosophy of science, which insists on the observability of all scientific objects. If you say, well, the theme of my dissertation, of my thesis, is unobservable, say, spirituality, say, of Russian people, then people can object about such thesis being defended, okay? Because what is this spirituality? Well, of course, Hegel also spoke much about spirituality of the German people, or the German spirit, or the spirit of the German nation. But now it seems that these concepts are not so scientific as they were in the beginning of the 19th century when Hegel wrote those words, okay? So I would say Gorny is something, well, difficult. So we'll speak about that later. Now I prefer to stick to sublunar and heavenly. So this is a dichotomy, this is a division which for Aristotle is very important. So the objects of the sublunar world are built out of 4 elements, which are very easy to remember. They are earth, water, air, and fire. Well, I think in India the situation is more or less the same as the primordial elements, and these elements are not eternal, so they are not immutable. They can easily sort of interact with each other and even change into each other. So say water can be changed into air, fire can be extinguished by water, for example, and so on. So well, yes, Zoroastrian, yes, 4 substances. Well, I think it is more or less common to every developed civilization that these primordial elements. Well, the word element is element, is a Latin one. It is a translation of Greek word stichia, stoi, here. I think like that, stoi here. Maybe I'm not an expert in Greek, so, and I write in, but we in Russian we have the word stichia. Well, it is like a poetic one, stichia. Well, it's sometimes a thunderstorm also called stichia, or we have стихийное бедствие, which is just an accident like an earthquake. But stocheia in Greek means element. So when Aristotle wrote about elements, he didn't use the word element, but the Greek word stoicheia or stichia. Okay. Now these 4 elements sort of form a certain group of symmetry, because there are 2 oppositions, cold and hot, cold, hot, and say, well, wet, we'll say wet, and dry. So out of these 2 pairs of oppositions, we can form all the 4 elements. If we take cold and dry, this will be earth. If we take hot and wet, it will be air. If we take cold and wet, it will be water. And if we take hot and dry, it will be air. So this is quite symmetrical and quite, I would say, deductive. So this is a deductive way of thinking, not inductive way. So Aristotle started from concepts and not from realities. That's why for him the most important is that the theory should be beautiful and symmetrical and somehow easy to understand and easy to be taught to others. So this concept is very easy to teach. There are only 2 opposite qualities for elements, and that's basically all. This is all the Mendeleev table of Aristotle, okay? So it's very much easier to remember than modern physics, okay? But of course, it is, well, it is logically, it is not contradictory, you see? but it contradicts objective reality. Okay, for example, in one of his works, Aristotle writes the following, that if you take two bodies, one of which is twice heavier than the other, then the twice heavier body will move in twice, how to say, uh, twice swiftly, or with twice more, well, with the, you understand that the velocity will be twice as large as the velocity of the less heavier body. Of course, many people have asked the question, why couldn't Aristotle make a very simple experiment? Just take two stones, one of which is twice heavier than the other, and drop them from some tower, or like Galileo did in the 16th century. But but here we just are remaining without the answer. Only we can see that Aristotle was a great enemy of experimentation. Or maybe he had no time for that because he wrote many books on many subjects. Of course, his masterpiece are his 6 logical treatises, or treatises devoted to logic. This is, I think, what remains eternal, and somehow the most important contribution of Aristotle to the mentality even of the common man today, because computers, for example, are built on Aristotelian logic, either yes or no, okay, or 0 and 1, okay, binal or binal system, okay. So this comes from Aristotle. Well, now we'll return to this sublunar world. So cold and hot, wet and dry, okay. Shall we make a short break, because we 45 minutes is left. I think you are tired a little bit. Well, you are just peacefully resting, all the 129 of you. Maybe somebody has already left the Zoom. Well, you see, it's difficult, of course, I understand, and difficult for me also, but we have to manage it somehow. We cannot just ignore the roots of science, because you see, I think I have proved to you enough that some basic concepts of modern science were like guessed or even coined, I mean, at least as far as the terminology is concerned, by the ancient Greeks. So this deserves our attention and our estimation, kind of. So now we come to the heavenly world. So what is most interesting, that starting from moon, all the heavenly bodies, according to Aristotle, are built out of ether, the fifth element. I'm sorry, I don't know where I write ether. Well, ether will have a long history, the concept of ether. It will end with Albert Einstein, I think. So this concept of ether. But of course, when Einstein said that there's no privileged system of reference connected with ether, he meant not the ether of Aristotle, but just an imaginary continuum or imaginary medium, milieu, in which light propagates and which is motionless, which has absolute motionlessness. Well, and so every motion can be, how to say, graduated according to the its comparison with the like quietness or stillness of ether. Okay, But with Aristotle, ether is quite another thing. Ether is an element which is somehow opposed to these sublunar elements. So it is unchangeable and eternal. And out of ether are built all the heavenly bodies, starting from moon and ending with so-called fixed stars. Well, why they are called fixed? Because they are fixed on the sphere. And this is also important thing, that for sublunar elements, their corresponding natural motions are upwards and downwards. For water and earth, which are considered heavy, so-called heavy elements, they naturally move downwards to the center of the world, which corresponds with the center of the spherical earth. And the elements of earth, or air and fire, they move upwards to their own regions, but not to infinity, of course. So that in this way, Aristotle was able to sort of interpret, for example, the climbing of bubbles of air in water. Okay, so he said, well, this is because air is has this lightness, which and his natural motion is upwards. Also, the flames of the fire tend to just move upwards, and that also is explained by Aristotle, that the fire has a tendency to move upwards. Also, of course, if the stone is fallen or falls from the tower, then you can easily explain this motion as natural. Also, if we have water, also drops of water coming from the clouds, well, we say rain, we can explain it as that water is also a heavy element. But with ether, the corresponding motion is rotational motion. For ether, the natural motion is to rotate around the center of the world. That is how Aristotle explained the diurnal rotation or daily rotation of the earth, as we now call it. So according to Aristotle, it was not the earth that moved around its axis, but the fifth element that moved around the earth. So sun rises and sets not because of the rotation of the earth, but because sun is taking part in natural motion, natural for Ethereal bodies, because sun is made out of ether. Okay, that was a stumble block for the medieval church, because it embraced this Aristotelian view of the world. And when Galileo challenged this view by his observations, for example, of mountains on the surface of the moon, and there could be no mountains in the ethereal body, you understand? So that created a major scandal, because all the schoolmen were proved to be sort of falsified, because they based their scholastic philosophy on Aristotelian false, proved to be false assumptions. Okay, so Galileo made a kind of a revolution by his observation of the rough surface of the moon. Okay, well, we'll speak about that later. Now it is enough, I think. Now we'll just come to the core. What is continualistic? Why should we call Aristotelian cosmos continualistic? Because these elements, if you want to divide them into smaller parts, you can, according to Aristotle, divide them in infinity. So you can divide a drop of water into 2 smaller drops, and then these 2 smaller drops into other 2 smaller drops, so there will be 4 little drops. And if you continue this division, there will be no end. So you will not come to the molecule of water, according to Aristotle. So there was no concept of molecule, because there was no concept of atom, because Aristotle was a just enemy of atomism. Okay, so he couldn't agree with either. Otherwise, if you have to stop the division, then it will turn out that Democritus was right after all. This, of course, Aristotle couldn't bear, that his enemy will be right in certain way. So he had to insist on the infinite division of his elements. So this seems to be very clear for us, because we understand that you cannot divide a drop of water, say, well, 2 or 4 times, yes, it is okay. But if you come, say, I don't know, it is easy to calculate when you come to the millimicrons, and you have to stop this division, and you will find that that water will be dissolved into atoms, the molecule of water. Okay, so this is that's why it's difficult sometimes for modern man to get into Aristotelian sort of shoes, understand, or to see the world as Aristotle sees it. I know that for many people it was a stumbling block. For example, American philosopher of science Thomas Kuhn, the author of the famous book The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, he himself confesses that it was very difficult for him to understand Aristotelian idea of motion, how Aristotle thought of motion, well, how Aristotle imagined motion. So it is difficult. You see, we are brought up in quite another, how to say, systems or notions or attitudes, and this world seems quite strange. I mean, Aristotelian world. The world of Democritus is much more familiar to us. Well, it is in the question of Matvei Kolesnik, did Democritus estimate the number of atom types? No, because otherwise he had to explain this like universal constant. If you say that there are 10 types of atoms or 20 types of atoms, you should explain why there are 20 or not 30, okay? So Democritus didn't want this kind of awkward questions, so he suggested, according to the fragments that we see, that there are infinite number of atom types. So an infinite just asks for no explanation, okay? If we say that there's infinite number of men in the world, then it is easier for us to just get with that questions, get away with questions why there are finite numbers of men. If, for example, well, of course, if we take a Christian notion that a man possesses a a soul which is immortal, okay, immortal soul, then it is quite an entity. So you can then number those who have this immortal soul. Well, for example, it will be 127 participants now. 2 have left already with their immortal souls with them. So we see 127 immortal souls, but your parents also presumably have immortal souls. But we can start counting, and we'll come to the first man or to the first couple. We will exclude the Neanderthals, like Neanderthals. Well, and the chimpanzee. But so we'll come to this quite finite number, and then we should just explain why this number. Well, the Christian theologians say this is the number of the fallen angels. So the number of immortal human souls is equal to the number of the fallen angels. So God wanted to sort of compensate for these fallen angels by creating men with their immortal souls. Well, it seems plausible, but also there's a problem that some souls would be lost eternally. They will be in hell. So whether this is a good compensation for the fallen angels, so maybe only we should count those who will find themselves in heaven. Well, you see how many questions can be sort of put by this. We'll come to this problem. This is a problem of contingency. I will say it frankly. For example, the problem of, say, why proton is 2,000 times heavier than electron. Okay, this is a like a constant which sort of asks for explanation, and perhaps it is not yet given. Okay, so there's a lot of questions that remain here. These are called contingency, the problem of contingency. So this, if there were a fixed number of atoms, then it will be, this number will be contingent. This is asking for explanation. And Democritus didn't want the concept of God the creator, who could have created finite number of types of atoms according to his goodwill. Okay, so this is not an explanation that we are supposed to find in Democritus or with materialists like Engels, for example, or even Dawkins, I think. So for materialists, it's like a crux or cross which they have to bear, that something remains unexplained. For believers, of course, it's easier because they say, well, that's God's will. That a proton is 2,000 times heavier than electron. Okay, that was God's design. Okay, well, we will speak about that later when we'll cover the medieval epoch. Would argue the exclusion of Neanderthals. Yes, of course, it was just a joke, you understand, that because it was inspired by the question about the number of the types of atoms, okay? So every question of of dimensions or of dimensionless constants, like constant of the fine structure, which is 1 divided by 137. So they all pose some questions of why so and not in another way, okay? Or it just can be a generalization proposed by Leibniz, why there's something rather than nothing at all, okay? So this is a philosophical question, okay? Why there's something rather than nothing, okay? Well, now we'll continue with Aristotle for a few more details. This is, I think, I will just amuse you with ancient Greek medicine, with its 4 types of fluids. This is, first of all, phlegm, then there's a yellow bile, there's a blood, and there's a black bile. So among the ancient Greek medicines who knew Aristotle, for example, Galen, there was a like a temptation to somehow connect 4 Aristotelian elements with the 4 liquids of the human body, which these 4 liquids come from Hippocrates, a famous Greek physician. So now we can say that phlegm easily corresponds with water, okay? Phlegm with water. A yellow bile with fire. Blood with air. Because, for example, blood is wet and hot. This is the qualities of air. Yes? Who can deny it? That blood is wet and hot at the same time. So it corresponds to air, because air is, according to Aristotle, wet and hot. And the black bile is, all that remains is earth. So black bile is earth. So in Greek, black bile is melancholy. So this, here comes the problem of melancholy, which will be the subject of many art pieces and novels. And you remember this famous drawing, engraving of Albrecht Dürer, Melancholy, and others. If we can ask Marina Teplyakova to show us Melancholy of Albrecht Dürer, if you can find it in Google Pictures. Melancholy.
Okay, I'll try.
Yes, please. You can say, you can also do it in Russian. Melancholy, just to amuse people, because usually the main, how to say, reproach to me is that I am showing not enough pictures.
Could you repeat, please? Melancholy.
Melancholy Dürer. Dürer. Oh, I'm sorry, Dürer. Albrecht Dürer. His name is Albrecht. Or Albert, he calls himself. But he's known as Albrecht. Albrecht Dürer, Melancholy. I think it is not difficult to find this illustration.
This one?
I don't see it. Ah, yes, yes. Thank you very much. Yes, this is Melancholy. You see this, an inscription, Melancholia. This is, well, it's not maybe strictly strictly Greek, because the Greeks say melancholy, but here's the fourth letter is E, but still you see that it is this engraving, Albrecht Dürer. Well, I think this leads us to Renaissance period, you see, but I think it's quite interesting. You can meditate on. There are also numbers in this square. You see, this is magic square with some numbers. So those of you who love mathematics can just see the numbers in this magic square. And I'm not an enthusiast of numbers. That's why I finished my career as a physicist very briefly, because I don't like mathematics, and I like words, you see. That makes it easier for me to just to dabble into humanities, okay, like philosophy of science and so on. So I understand and I appreciate very much people who love numbers, love mathematics, and if there are some among you who love mathematics, I very much appreciate your talents, which I possess not in the needed how to say quantity. Yes. Okay, Marina, you can stop the presentation. I think it is enough. All the people have seen it. So melancholy is like a kettle of Russell's kettle. You see, because if yellow bile can easily be found, if you have anatomical sessions, for example, you can find their liver and well, special reservoir which contains this yellow bile, which is in Russian called желчный пузырь, but I'm not sure I can translate it immediately into English. Well, yes, gallbladder. Okay, thank you very much. And so you can easily, if you attend the anatomic theater, for example, in Holland in the 17th century, they will show you this gallbladder and this liver and how. But if you ask the anatomist, show me the reservoir, the container of the black bile, so he will only, well, just shrug his shoulders. He couldn't show us. And this was also the major obstacle, in accepting ancient medicine by the Europeans, because this black bile couldn't be found, okay? But of course, melancholy as a disposition of the like psychological disposition, like we call bipolar disease or depression. This, of course, could have been found in any epoch. So this depression or this melancholy should have been explained, and so this was an explanation. This mystical or mysterious or inobservable fluid was the source of our depressions. Okay, so with the so that makes it like a full concept. So the medieval man, when he inherited the Aristotelian cosmos and Aristotelian philosophy combined with the ancient Greek medicine, he had a complete worldview. There were also other symmetries of the kind. For example, the alchemists invented the symmetry between 7 heavenly bodies and 7 metals. So sun was associated with gold, moon with silver, Mercury with mercury, Venus with copper, Mars with iron, Jupiter with tin, and Saturn with lead. So there were 7 metals and 7 heavenly bodies. You see how it was all optimistic and easy and somehow perfect, didn't need any other interventions, and people were felt very cozy in this world, finite, symmetrical, somehow with all these correspondences between heavenly world and sublunar world. So metals are in the sublunar world, heavenly bodies are in the heavenly world, and they interact somehow. Sublunar world receives influences from heavenly world, and on this premise is based astrology. Somehow these minerals and metals contain these qualities of the heavenly bodies, and that makes them also influential. So you wear the gold say ring, not only because of some sign that you are married, but because gold somehow corresponds with the sun and gives you some energy of the sun and protects you. Okay, so this was a world which is very now difficult for us to understand, but you can believe me then that the medieval man and even the Renaissance man felt very cozy and very comfortably in this world. Okay, and when at last this world was broken by Galileo, by Newton, by Descartes, a man felt like he was sort of like lost his paradise. Okay, well, like sent out, or how to say izgnan. Well, you can say, Marina, would you say izgnan? Izgnan.
Probably banished.
Banished,
Yeah.
yes, of course. Banished is very good. So he was banished like Adam was banished from paradise. So the modern man, starting from the 17th century, was banished or expelled, better say, also variant, from this cozy world, finite, very, how to say, very well understood, in which a man felt quite at ease. Okay. Now there's a question in the search of this symmetry caused by human nature to live in well understood world. Yes, I think yes, there is a certain desire, psychological desire, which Aristotle expressed in his famous words, which starts his work Metaphysics, that every uh, man has a inner desire to learn, or to get, how to say, uh, every man by his inner nature tends to knowledge. Okay, well, this is more or less a translation from the original Greek. So every man by his nature tends to knowledge, so wants to know. So this like appetite to knowledge is inborn in every man, and that's why uh, people want this complete knowledge. They don't want this like white spots in our knowledge. You see, they want everything explained, starting from theology, or the prime mover according to Aristotle, and ending with some the sublunar elements. So everything has to be explained. And when this, how to say, the world which man was accustomed to sort of was like destroyed, fell into pieces, then there was a sense of insecurity, and then appeared melancholy. So melancholy became very fashionable theme in the 17th century, because the people felt psychologically um, not at ease. Okay, there appeared psychological problems with this infinity, and there was a French scientist and philosopher, Blaise Pascal, who said that these infinite spaces terrify me. Okay, infinite can be a terrific concept. Okay, that's why just this is the end of my lecture on antiquity, ancient period. Uh, on Thursday, I hope we shall continue, and I will speak with you about Plato. And Plato is also very important philosopher. Uh, well, because people even speak about Platonism of Galileo, for example, because, well, with Plato, there's a concept of ideal. So, yes, exactly. I feel fear and wonder why I'm here and not there. Yes, okay, this is a citation from the so-called Thoughts, the work of Pascal, which was unfinished, but later edited and published by his sister. Well, I would say that Plato is important for this notion of ideal, which is also used in physics, starting from ideal gas. Yes, ideal gas. So also ideal objects. When you say that motion without friction is ideal motion, okay? So motion in a vacuum is ideal motion. And also there's ideal spheres which move smoothly, say, on the surface, okay, without, well, also we can say material point. These are all like abstractions and idealization. So this, I think this theme deserves special attention, and not these 7 minutes that are left to 12 o'clock. So I think we'll end here. Maybe we'll again return to atomistic concept, to Pythagorean worldview, to Aristotelian, because they will reappear in different periods of European civilization and science also. So just this is the beginning. This is like an overture. This is like, you see, well, I think somebody said that all the ancient philosophy in general is a certain overture to the, how to say, European civilization in general, because in ancient philosophy there can be found roots or seeds of every concept, almost every concept that we have now, okay? Well, that's I think it's important about ancient period. Now, I want to share with you my email, although it is written also on Canvas. So you can please write me if you have some questions. First of all, questions concern organization, how to enlist in my course, and well, I will try to send you the links to those who are not officially yet enlisted, but I also will have this like list or short list of those who want to uh, to register, and will send it to Matthew Mullerin, and perhaps he will do something with that, as well as it was done last year. But last year I went to Skoltech and I went to Matthew and we spoke with him face to face. Now I have to write a letter, okay? But I think the result will be the same, and it will be, I hope the result will be positive, okay? Of course, Zoom interaction has its limitations, and I think returning to Plato, it is more Platonic. You understand? It has less, and it is also virtual. And this concept of virtuality is a medieval concept. Well, this term virtual was born in the Middle Ages, like the term real. And these two concepts, real and virtual, they were born in the frames of medieval scholasticism. That will be the topic of another lecture, which perhaps will have on Tuesday, next Tuesday, but maybe also after Plato we can start the Middle Ages, or speaking about Christianity and its influence on the Latin West and Latin East also, and Greek East also, and Russia perhaps, but well, only in modest quantities, because this is a subject, I think, a little bit painful and creating a lot of discussions. Panpsychism. Yes, panpsychism, yes, of course, especially with Pythagoreans. This is called reincarnation. The concept of reincarnation was shared by Pythagorean school, okay? Well, if I think it is not so important, I mean, to modern science, but still, yes, of course, it existed, yes. Well, there are 3 minutes left. I would like to thank all of you for participating actively. Unfortunately, couldn't answer all the questions that were put to me in chat, but if you just send them to me privately on my email, I will answer them very eagerly. And these questions will help me to plan my future lectures, because I will understand, it will be like a feedback with you. I will understand what you want to know, to discuss, okay?